Alrighty, folks. I want to welcome you back to another video from Yates Computers Tips and Reviews. So this year is the rabbit hole. This was one of the kind of easiest but hardest kind of subjects to go through. And probably a lot of people don't actually think about a lot of these things. But it's your Windows OS. It's so many varieties and so many things out there nowadays that you can do, or you can get, or you can load, or you can do what you want with. From the last series I did with VM, that is a whole other unique experience you can do if you have the right operating system. No, not exactly. You can go out and buy software to do virtualizations. So the one I showed you was with Hyper-V that's integrated into Windows. Windows Pro and Server. Again, if you have educational or if you have home, that is not in there. So this is where the rabbit hole gets a little deeper. But then Windows Server does not have certain requirements, has certain requirements and performance differences than standard Windows. So if you want to use this computer at your home, I could technically load Server in here and run Office, simple little things. But when you get into some other little factors, like the big one is Wi-Fi. Server does not allow really Wi-Fi because you would not use Wi-Fi on a server. It will pretty much fail to load the drivers in. This subject will be also covered in another video I'm going to do because this is really a catch-22. Knowing what OS you have. You don't necessarily have to have Windows either. Linux has been around for a long time. You have Ubuntu, you have other versions out there. There was Red Hat. I don't know if they still exist or not, or if they've actually folded, but that was one of the big ones that were out there. There are other versions out there. I showed you in the VM video how to load in Windows 11. And what I thought was really interesting was I was running Windows 11 on a computer that supposedly did not support Windows 11. Nope. But of course, if you've done your homework on this, you could go in there and find all the little hacks and cracks and stuff on how to run Windows 11 on an older PC that it's not supported. Microsoft has said you can run Windows 11 on an old computer that's not supported. You just ain't going to get no updates, or you ain't going to get nothing. Well, you kind of need the updates. Why would you run Windows 11 on a computer that's not supported that can run Windows 10, but Windows 10 won't have any updates? Well, it's the same difference as running Windows 11 then. Just wanted to put that out there. Kind of seems silly to upgrade and go through all that hoopla for the same features you're going to have. Not to mention, you're going to have to deal with the whole Windows 11 environment. The whole icons moved. Everything's moved. You're going to have to figure out where things are at. Or stick with what you know. So I wanted to go through and do a little short. I don't know how short it's going to be or how long it's going to be, but I want to do a video on that. You now have Microsoft that's the leader. You now have Apple. You have Apple computers out there that are running Apple OS, and you have Windows OS. I'm sure people have got Linux and probably other things on there. Goes back to the video of what's a server, what's not a server. Again, what's a computer, what's not a computer. I've shown you in there the little tiny thing I got up here. This is what I use to do all my capturing and all of that type of stuff. Got an unboxing, got a couple videos on that. It's quite amazing. That is led into a whole world of tech that is out there that they had this in the old days. You wouldn't want to buy that in the old days. They were so slow. They had the old spinning mechanical hard drives for laptops in them. They had a lot of the smaller tech in there, laptop memory, all of that type of stuff to cut down on space. They're probably just twice as thick. The little cubes. You can go do your research, do your homework, you'll see that stuff's been out there. But they're not to the performance level as this technology is today. Hard drives have gotten so small. That's a whole nother video I'm going to have to do from all these ones that I've done, because the tech has moved up. There is some really interesting, crazy stuff going on in the last year or two in tech. Solid state SATA drives. The prices have just rock bottom. Whew. And it's kind of funny because people are like, man, I don't know why this has gone down so cheap and blah, 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 blah. And it's kind of hard for me to even kind of concept and say this because people don't want them. They don't need them. I bet there's no other YouTube out there that is actually going to say this right now. You do not actually even need a SATA SSD drive. A lot of people will tell you, oh yeah, you use that as your secondary drive or your primary drive, or you use that for backups or whatever you need to. In today's age, you don't even need that. M.2 drives are like 4 or 8 terabyte right now drives. Some motherboards support easily 2 of them, 4 of them, or more. You can put a controller card in there that goes into a slot and add 4 or more or 2 M.2 drives on there. So technically you don't need a SATA drive. To me, that after all these years of, oh, you know, going to SATA, it's so much faster, it's so much better, it's so much, to now say we've gotten to a point where if you want to improve your computer performance, you put in a SATA drive, is now pretty much obsolete. You want to buy a new computer. The OSs can handle it. All the operating systems can run on that now. All the hardware's there. Now you have a version of 4.3 or 4.4. The bus, the speeds, it's like it's gotten to a crazy point. So it gets back to now the OS. What OS you want to run on that? And it's kind of like a crazy concept to me to think about that. You don't want a SATA drive anymore. Because dealing with computers for a long time, you always put in the hard drive and you put in the cable and you wanted to make sure you placed it in the rack. You wanted to make sure it had airflow. You want to make sure, your cable flow is all good so you're not blocking the airflow in the case. And none of that matters no more. It all goes right on the motherboard. So to me, that's really kind of like weird, because you're taught all these things. Now, all these things that you're taught aren't even a factor anymore. Of course, you might still need one of these big monsters because you need to do backup, or you have too much data to fit on a SATA or an M.2. Because you might need a 128, 300 terabyte drive. Put it on one of the big monsters. So, to me, I thought that was kind of an interesting concept to even think of, is now you can tell people you don't even need a SATA drive. You don't even need a hard drive anymore. Server boards, some of them run off of SD cards. There's SD cards that are actually, you put on the board and you load stuff on them. Your controllers and all of that type of stuff. I think that's going to go away pretty soon because of the limited speed. Because it's looking like the M.2 platform is going to be so much faster that I think that's going to go away too. So this is where that comes into the OS, is mentioning these drives, because that's where you actually physically put them. The VMs, all of those type of things. How many operating systems do you want to run on that system? All of those type of things. Now you can actually load Windows 11 Pro, load your VM, run Linux on there, run whatever you want on your Windows system, and you can have the best of both worlds. You can have your VM OS and your other OS. If you want to run programming, you want to do web design, you want to do something else that has to deal with another operating system, you don't need two systems anymore. You can do it all on one. So, this is why I did a lot of those VM videos, was to go a little deeper into the OS part, to explain the OSs. Maybe you need to run a Windows 95, Windows 98, because you have a piece of shop equipment, a machine press or something that molds something, and you have to have that software to code it, to communicate the layout and all that type of stuff. If you're in that environment, maybe this will help. Not to mention, it keeps that virtualized OS away from any kind of internet, any kind of other things, because you could tell it, no NIC card. Of course, you're probably going to need a NIC card. You might need that virtual OS to communicate right to your machine. So I touched on some of that in networking and some of that in some of these other things. But I wanted to go through and explain why that is considered a rabbit hole. Because when you get into those things, you get into more complicated things like software and other things that have to deal with it. Mentioned server, wireless cards. Had an issue just the other day where we had a server and we have a wireless access point. Well, be nice. Oh man, if we could get that off of this network and get it on the internet over here to bypass whatever issues we're having, server won't work because it does not like wireless cards. It's not designed to be on wireless. To me, I kind of think that's kind of silly, because you might have wireless networking capability somewhere in your building, that it's easier just to hook that to the wireless network than to hook your wireless network into your server. There might be certain reasons why you want to sublet them, separate them. Well, server doesn't really allow you to do that at that point. So it's kind of an interesting thing, especially when you start getting into security servers and security stuff, trying to figure out how many VMs you need to control all the different subnets, VLANs, all the other stuff you got. Because what if you're in a business environment that has Linux machines, Apple machines, Windows machines? You might need to have VMs set up to control your Apple machines and your Linux machines and your Windows machines. Some of those security software can kind of handle talking to the different ones, but sometimes there's certain add-ons or certain, maybe you need to put another individual VM to communicate, to relay, to handle security packages or whatever it needs, especially like if you're dealing with patching. You might have to do some work on some of these things to get them to work. So, wanted to bring that up because that all falls into the OS, VMs. Maybe you have a Windows server. That's why I brought up Windows 11, Windows 10, because this is what I've actually done, is I have the server edition running a VM. I have a standard server running standard Windows 10 Pro running a VM to handle distributing other packages. I don't need a server. I don't need server OS. So that's where this falls into that rabbit hole of, okay, I have server hardware running Windows 10 Pro, but I don't need Windows Server features or the crutch or the disadvantage of running Windows Server. As in, I can't run Wi-Fi off of it. I can't do other little things off of it. That way it also gives me the variable of now I have two OSs where if this one doesn't let me do what I want, I can go and do it on this one. If this one doesn't let me do what I want, I can go back over to server. So this is why I consider this the black hole. And this is why it's under OS. Because what if I need to communicate to Linux machines? Odds are it's probably going to have to be on the server OS. Maybe I have issues. Maybe I need to have another virtual machine to help out that server machine. Well, then I have the Windows 10 machine. You have these variables out there. Again, you're going to have to do your homework. You're going to have to do your research. A lot of times you get stuck in a pinch and you try to get a hold of support, and support might not be too good at it. Because, again, it depends on your environment. If you're running 200 computers in a building, or if you're running 9,000 computers in a building, the configurations and setups are going to be different. And if you're running 9,000 computers, is it in one building, multiple buildings? Is it a campus? Is it across a town? Across the country? Across the world? How are these communicating? How are they? You have a whole bunch of variables there. So if you're running 9,000 computers in a campus that's enclosed where you have wires running across back and forth, okay. If you're in a town where you have two different buildings on two different ends of town that need to communicate, well, guess what? You might have a whole security system here and a whole security system here. You might not just have one that's distributed out to all these central locations. So again, that's where the OS comes in. And that's where the importance of server workstation, computer, knowing the difference too. Again, server, workstation, computer is Windows Home, Windows Pro, Windows Server. So I wanted to go through and break those down because I know I have not really broke those down in that sort of a way. I've mentioned at home, if you want certain security features and other things, you need to upgrade to Pro. But there's other reasons behind that also. That's why the lowest grade version is considered home. It is for home use. Professional, for professional use. Server, of course, is for server use. Of course, you have enterprise server, you have database server, you have other server versions that are pretty much self-explanatory. They're labeled pretty much self-explanatory. I don't want to go through and try to make it too simple for a lot of people to understand, but this is what's out there, so people are aware. So I wanted to do a short little video. I want to thank everybody for watching. Another video from Yates Computers Tips and Review. Make sure you hit the bell, hit the subscribe. Thank you so much.